everybody, and welcome to Singing Time. I don't know if you guys know, but this last week was a really cool holiday. On the 24th of every July, we celebrate Pioneer Day. Now, as many of us know, as our church was starting out, they started off in a couple of different places, but they ended up crossing a large portion of the United States to come and settle in a place where they could worship how they wanted and people wouldn't persecute them. So today we are going to take a little bit of a look at the journey that the pioneers took. And we're going to read some stories and we're going to sing some songs and hopefully learn something about the heritage of our church, okay? So we're going to start down here in Missouri. Now, when the Saints were in Missouri, the people down there did not like that they were there at all. In fact, they didn't like it so much that they ran them out. They made them all leave. So our saints came up here to Nauvoo. Now, when they got to Nauvoo, it was just a swamp. But the saints turned it into a beautiful city, and they built the Nauvoo Temple while we were there. But the saints didn't have very much money, so they couldn't pay people to build it. So they built it themselves. Most of the men worked in the quarry. That means that they were there cutting out the stone that they would use to build the temple. And they would donate for their tithing instead of giving money. One day out of every 10, they would go and they would work on the temple. And the sisters would sew clothes for the workers, and they would prepare food for them. And sometimes they would donate 1 penny a week. That's what they had. And so they gave what they had to help build God's kingdom. But before they left Nauvoo, over 5,000 people were able to do their temple work. But unfortunately, just as happened in Missouri, the saints in Nauvoo were driven out. Now, they didn't want anything to happen to the temple, so they paid someone to take care of it, and they locked it. But unfortunately, the enemies of the church soon took it, and they destroyed all of the furnishings inside. They burned it down, and then 2 years later, a tornado came through and it wiped everything else out. So the Nauvoo Temple was destroyed, but they rebuilt it, and it's beautiful. So after Nauvoo, the saints had to leave, and they decided to head west because west was kind of wide open. There weren't a lot of people out there, at least not big cities. So they moved west, and it's a long way. I don't know if you guys can see here on my map. These are states, and we live even farther east than this. So they're kind of in the middle of the country right now, and they could make it to a place called Winter Quarters, and it's in Nebraska. And there in Winter Quarters, oh, you want to know what? Sister Binstrup forgot we were going to sing a song. This is singing time, Sister Binstrup. We're going to go ahead and sing I Love to See the Temple because we love all of our beautiful temples, and they loved their beautiful Nauvoo temple. So let's go ahead. We're going to sing I Love to See the Temple.
Get your temples out.
Get your temples out if you want. That's right. I love to see the temple. I'm going there someday to feel the Holy Spirit, to listen and to pray. For the temple is a house of God, a place of love and beauty. I prepare myself while I am young. This is my sacred duty. All right. So as we said, after Nauvoo, they went west. And there they settled a new place called Winter Quarters, but they didn't make it a big permanent place because they knew they needed to keep going. But the way was so long that they had to have somewhere to stop for the winter. And so they named it Winter Quarters. Now, I have kind of a fun story about Winter Quarters. there were lots of saints, as I said, traveling, and one of those saints was a young girl whose name was Mary Wilkinson. And she was traveling with her 8 brothers and sisters and her mom and dad. And they stopped here at winter quarters on their way west with the saints. And while they were at winter quarters, they had one little tent. They didn't have enough buildings for everybody to stay in, and so a lot of them just stayed in tents during the winter. And winters in Nebraska can be really, really rough. Now, Mary's mother got sick, and she was wrapped up in blankets, and they did the best they could to take care of her. And one morning, Mary was outside trying to find something for her family to eat, and she looks up, and the sky is full of dark, dark clouds. And all of a sudden, rain starts pouring down, and the wind is blowing hard. And so she runs back inside. Rocks are hitting her in the face, and she tries to get back in the tent, and she makes it into the tent, and her family is gathered in there, and they can hear thunder, and she said that it was exploding like cannons, and the tent shook, and water started to flow in under the sides of the tent. She said it was like they were in the middle of a river. The wind howled, and they could hear other tents falling to the ground, and Father ran into the tent, and he said, "Mary, boys, our tent is about to blow away." Now the kids had lifted Mother up and put her on some boxes, and she was so sick they didn't want her to get cold and wet. And so the water was up to the kids' knees. The tent was rattling, and Father grabbed onto one of the poles, and Mary and her brothers were all holding onto the poles, doing their best to keep their tent, their own little home, from blowing away completely. And while this was going on, her father said, "Mary, sing." And so she started to sing, and she said that at first her voice was scared, and she sang quietly. But as she sang, she found her strength, and soon her voice was filling their whole tent loudly and clearly. By the time she finished, everyone had stopped crying, and when she started her next song, her father and one of her brothers joined in, and they sang hymn after hymn, and with each song, their comfort grew greater. Now at last, the rain stopped, the wind quieted, and they were able to let go of their tent. And when they went outside, they found that their tent was one of only 2 that had not blown down. The rest were gone. Mary says that she knew that the Lord had protected her and her family. So we are going to go ahead and sing "Families Can Be Together Forever," just like we want our family to be, and just like Mary's family was.
Mama, where's the children's tent?
I have a family here on earth. They are so good to me. I want to share my life with them through all eternity. Families can be together forever through Heavenly Father's plan. I always want to be with my own family, and the Lord has shown me how I can. The Lord has shown me how I can. All right. Now, as you can see, they still had a lot of dead ground to cross. They had to cross all of Nebraska and all of Wyoming. And these brave and faithful saints did. They kept going, and it was hard. There were dangers. Food was scarce, but they kept going, and they relied on the Lord, and they relied on each other. Now, because it wasn't just one group of saints, they kept coming in something called companies. So that was a big group of saints. They kept coming and coming, called Martin's Cove. Now, because of various circumstances, they got off late, and winter was very bad that year. And that group of saints went through some very difficult things. And they got here, and there was a huge blizzard, and there was snow everywhere. And when they were finally able to get going again, they realized that they had to cross a river again. Now, they didn't have a bridge they could go across. And so when they crossed rivers, they had to walk through them, except this river was full of ice. And these poor people were exhausted and sad. They had lost loved ones. They felt like they had no hope. But, unbeknownst to them, back in Utah, the Prophet Brigham Young had heard about these people, and he had sent relief parties to go save them. The first to get to that company were 3 young men. They were 18-year-old boys, and they saw these people and how they just couldn't get across that river. And so those boys carried almost every single person through the ice and the snow and the cold water. They made so many trips, and they got everyone across.
Without getting anyone wet.
No, they got wet.
Well, wet, but...
They got wet and they got cold. But the boys carried them. Now, that water was so cold, and the boys ran it for so long that it caused many, many health problems. And eventually those 3 boys died because of what they did for those saints. Because they loved them, even though they had never met them. Because they knew Christ, and they knew that he loved those people, and they followed his example. So now we're going to go ahead and sing Love One Another. All right? As I have loved you, love one another. This new commandment, love one another. By this shall men know ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. All right. So, after they got through the great big state of Wyoming, they made it to Utah. Now, when Brigham Young first made it across, he stood up on, when he saw the valley, he said something that we now consider quite famous. He said, "This is the place." Because they had just been walking, not sure where they were going to go. And when they got there, the Lord revealed to his prophet that this is where my people are going to settle. This is where you will be able to thrive. And so they settled Salt Lake City. And today there is a big, beautiful monument called This Is the Place Monument, right where they came in and saw the Salt Lake Valley. It was designed actually by Brigham Young's grandson, and it honors all of the brave pioneers who came from all over the world, really, and traveled across our great country and were sustained by their faith in the gospel that we follow today. Now, we don't have to cross in hand carts or wagons, do we? Some of us have ancestors that did, but you know what? A lot of us don't. A lot of us don't feel like we have a lot of connection to these pioneers. But we can be pioneers today. Like I said, not wearing bonnets and pulling hand carts. But there is a great primary song called To Be a Pioneer, and it talks about how you and me can be pioneers just like them. Because for us, the pioneer spirit isn't just being willing to walk through the snow and the mud and the bad weather. It was following their faith. And do you think that we can do that too? I think we can. I think it's important that we do, right? So we are going to end with our song, To Be a Pioneer, all right? You don't have to push a handcart, leave your family dear, or walk 100 miles or more to be a pioneer. You do need to have great courage, faith to conquer fear, and work with might for a cause that's right to be a pioneer. Awesome. So it said 3 things. We need to have great courage. We need to have faith, and let faith conquer our fear. And we need to work for a cause that's right. Now, I know that we can do that. I know that I can do it, and I know that you can do it. And through our Savior, Jesus Christ, He will help us, and we can be pioneers in our own life. I am so proud of you boys and girls for working so hard and for being who you are, and I so hope that we get to meet together again soon. I love you, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.